in the wake of the extraordinary story of the thefts from the British Museum a short while ago, I think it's incredibly important that Greece persists with its requests for the return of the Elgin marbles, and this would require a a law to overturn the 1960s law, which makes it impossible legally to return artifacts to their point of origin. And this is the sort of absurd law which is paralleled by the sort of laws envisaged at the moment about declaring what is unsafe legally to be safe. We can't legislate for nonsense, and the law which was put into effect to make it impossible to return artifacts from the British Museum is an absurdity which needs to be overturned. I think at the same time, it's important that we recognise that there are that although the British Museum has been extremely good in looking after artefacts, I mean, it has, for example, the biggest collection of ancient Buddhist literature, most of which has not been seen by the general public, but because of the internet, a lot of it is going to be digitized, a lot of it is going to be available for the first time. The French and German collections were destroyed because of the way they tried to exhibit them behind glass. The British Museum didn't do that, it just felt it was best simply to store them. And the same thing with so many of the artefacts held by the British Museum. They've survived because they've been hidden. The Elgin marbles are not in that position, and the Elgin marbles have suffered because of the goodwill of some twits, for example, those who cleaned the marbles. And of course, some of the marbles are at the bottom of the Mediterranean because the ships that Elgin hired sank. But the vast majority of those marbles are intact, and arguably, probably, they are in a better condition than they would have been if they had been left on the monument during a period of serious warfare. So there's arguments in both directions about the value of the British Museum. But the fact that there's been pilfering in the British Museum again means it's not sound. And I really admire the slight change that Kyriakos Mitsotakis is making to the request, which was originally made, if you remember, by the actress who was in those immensely impressive films like Never on a Sunday. And I remember she came to the British Museum and started weeping when she was weeping in the wrong gallery and had to be quietly moved into the correct gallery. But the whole, in fact, her there's a statue of her just as you were about to go into Plaka. In Greece, so opposite the Temple of Zeus, there's a statue of Melina Mercouri, a bust, and she was such a dynamic and enthusiastic actress and campaigner. But I think it's not so much a matter of returning what was stolen. It's a matter of reuniting great works of art, and I love Mitsotakis's comparison between the marbles and the Mona Lisa. It's emotive and brilliant, and he's at his most charming in this interview this morning on the BBC.
Now, here are the ones in the British Museum. There they are in their home in Athens. So at the moment, they're not together. You've said for a long time, Greece has said for a long time, that they would very much like to have them back. Now, where do you think they look better?
I think the answer is very clear. They do look better in the Acropolis Museum, a state-of-the-art museum that was built for that purpose. And again, this is not a question of returning artifacts whose ownership we question. We feel that these sculptures belong to Greece and that they were essentially stolen. But this is not, in my mind, an ownership question. This is a reunification argument. Where can you best appreciate what is essentially one monument? I mean, it's as if I told you that you would cut the Mona Lisa in half, and you would have half of it at the Louvre and half of it at the British Museum. Do you think your viewers would appreciate the beauty of the painting in such a way? Well, this is exactly what happened with the Parthenon sculptures, and that is why we keep lobbying for a deal that would essentially be a partnership between Greece and the British Museum, but which would allow us to return the sculptures to Greece and have people appreciate them in their original setting.
I think George Osborne, as the chair of the British Museum, now has a major job to thrust forward the agreement between the British government and the Greek government, the change of law that makes this pretty well permanent return, I expect, effective, so that we can see these marbles in the sunlight for which they were intended. I think Mitsotakis is being a little bit disingenuous, because they won't be returned to the Parthenon itself. They will be returned to the Parthenon Museum, which is not quite the Acropolis itself, but it is still within the light of Greece, and the light in the British Museum is not quite the same thing.